Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the less than imaginatively titled Mr. Chapple's Handcrafted podcast. We're back again today with another excellent guest that I think you're going to find really interesting. Before we drop into that and start talking to this wonderful person, I just want to remind everybody that we are sponsored by Close Call Creative, your one-stop shop for creative direction and digital media solutions. And would also ask you to please come along and subscribe to both the YouTube channel and to follow us on Spotify. Normally, this is where I jump straight into talk about my guest, but today I want to do a little shout out to one special person. I have found out that out of my uh, large number of nieces and nephews, one nephew of mine, Alfie, is listening and watching the podcast, and you are now officially my favorite nephew. Thank you, Alfie. With that, I am going to introduce our guest for today, who is the absolutely fantastic Carlin Brown. Those of you who know Carlin will know them as the bassist for the wonderful New Normal. They're the promoter behind Drag Wounds, and the New Normal have just released a 4-track EP called In Breach of Silence. And with that, I am going to throw it over to Carlin to give us a fuller introduction to themselves. Go for it, my friend.
Okay, wow. I'm Carlin. I'm just off the plane from Edinburgh after having a mad one last night. So not very pretty, but as Rob said, bassist for New Normal, promoter at Drag Wounds, complete lunatic. Yeah, I think you probably introduced me much better than I ever could, with much more finesse and credential, you know.
I think you gotta be slightly unusual to want to make a living in music in this town. So yeah, I think the lunacy has got to play a part of it. So as you'll be aware, the format of this is we do a little bit of your past, your present, your future, and hopefully kind of pick up something along the way. And with that, I wanted to kind of dive into about your past, a little bit about the origin. When did you first start making music yourself, and what did that feel like?
Well, I mean, I've always kind of like written wee songs here and there, whether it's lyrics or, it's just little bits and pieces. Really the most full and complete music that I ever have created has been with the New Normal. I've never really made anything substantial that was like recorded or, the people heard it. Apart from I did a really bad cover of the Metallica song question mark. Nothing else matters. I don't know how I forgot the most famous song probably. Anyway, but yeah, when I went to like a rock school thing when I was like 13. And we did like a cover of that. I remember I just kind of remember always being like on the outside of music, right? And it's weird now being so involved and people saying to me like, oh, other people are recommending me to other musicians or to bands that come over, or you go to Carlin and ask for advice there. Carlin will know the X, Y, and Z, blah blah blah. And I'm like, when did I become the directory? Do you know what I mean? Like, when did this happen? Because I spent so long looking on the outside and going like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not talented enough, I can't play enough, or whatever. And suddenly it's almost like it's completely flipped over, it's weird. But the feeling of kind of getting your songs together for the first time, I was just kind of like, nobody's going to like these. This is going to be, you kind of get into a room, and when we were first making songs as New Normal, I was kind of like, I don't know if anybody will like this. I don't know if we're any good or this, that, and ever. But people, it was really well received by the people who got it. There were other people who didn't get it and didn't care, and they let us know on every occasion that they could, whether it was after a gig or it was online or something like that. But yeah, it was a lovely feeling. And I think it's the only part about being a musician I do like. Sometimes so there's so much of it is stress, but when you've just written a new song and you're in the room like, yes, we did it, it's such a good thing.
I've got to say, it's it's kind of strange to me, but it's also really, really wholesome to think that you do have that level of insecurity about your own playing and your own writing, because when I first met you, it was in the new normal on stage, giving. I can't remember where was I first saw you because I've seen you all play so many times at this stage,
I think it
but
was the Mandela.
that's the one that's kind of coming closest to my mind. And yeah, you came up and you talked to me, and I was completely flustered and overwhelmed at meeting somebody new. And you, like, both in person and on stage, you give off this radiance of deeply knowing what you were doing, and huge confidence. And and I've said this to you before as well. Like your stage presence, your fashion sense. These are things that really stand out, and they're like, wow. And this is one person that's totally got it all together, and then to hear that there's any degree of insecurity about your musicianship is delightful. Thank you.
I think, to be honest with you, like I do have insecurities, but I've just got to the point of like faking it until I've made it. In some respects, to myself anyway. When I talk to other people, I try to be as genuine and as kind and everything as I can be, and just a lot of the time, I've said this before, sometimes I talk to people as if they're not real. It kind of just takes the mystique away. People say like, "Oh, but imagine the audience is in their underwear and you'll be fine." I'm just like, "Do you know what? I'm just going to get on with things." A lot of people you meet in your life are just like little fleeting visits or people that you'll never see again. Especially in the world of music. There's a lot of musicians or a lot of bands and stuff, and you're with them for like 2 minutes, and I've just stopped caring what people think anymore. It's either people are all going to be with you or they're going to be against you or whatever else. But I think that I keep so much emotion as well. Like there's always plates spinning, the phone's always going off. There's another gig coming up. I'm booking something else. I'm emailing somebody else. I'm badgering somebody to come over and work with me so that I can, they can play it. I can hopefully give them money and stress about that for weeks on end. There's always something else. So I think I just keep myself busy and I've just stopped caring what other people think, and there's real power in that.
I love that idea. It's something that I try to live into myself. Can I just ask you one question? How did Drag Wounds itself come about? At what point do you go from, being in a band to going, you know what, I'm going to do this myself and do the promotion side?
So I have talked about this a wee bit at length, so I'll give you as much of the context as I can because I think last time I was like, here's the too long didn't read. But when we started as the new normal, see for the first like I'm gonna go until 2023 when we released our EP, so it must have been the first 2 years. We did get booked, but we always got booked on like real like pick the name out of the hat lineups, and now you're playing. We'd be like this punk band on stage of people playing Arctic Monkeys covers, or like like folk bands, or just really random lineups that didn't make sense, and we were always the odd one out, and we didn't have a lot of the songs now that like you're going to see when you come and see us. Like we didn't have Sick, we didn't have like we had Not Yours at some point during the last like year and a bit of that. You know what I mean? It was like so much of it wasn't there. The puzzle was not complete. And we started to write songs and abandon songs and whatever else. But a lot of my time was spent harassing venues as just a person being like, "Can I put a gig on in your space?" And they would be like, "Yes, mate, you can. It's going to cost you this massive amount of money because you're not a promotion, or we just think you're some kid that's trying to basically, you know what I mean?" They're just like, "Hey, you can do it. It's going to cost you 500 odd quid." And I have a friend who's the manager of the Hop House in Bangor, and he used to be the supervisor in the Goat Stow, but she's now gone. But it was like a bar and venue in Bangor, and he used to let me basically have the space, and let me run gigs out of it. And some of them were really successful, some of them were not. Um, but eventually, over time, once we released our EP and we got a wee bit of traction, and it stopped being a case of like I need to book everything and haul all the gear, because it wasn't just like I'm booking this venue. I'm also bringing the speakers, the desk. I'm working the sound. I'm working the door. Do you know what I mean? It was the full package of being like, holy dick, this is hard work. Um, so eventually we got picked up by a promotion company called Midsound Productions, who are Brazilian people who live in Dublin, and they put us on with Dead Fish. Dead Fish are a really huge. Brazilian punk slash hardcore kind of crossover band in Brazil. Um, Over there, they're they're really huge. They're famous. They play to, like 10,000 people every time they play. We had no perception of this, right? And we also did not realize how many expat Brazilians were down south. So we agreed to these gigs. They found us on, like, I think Neil put sick into like the Irish punk, Facebook, just trying to like throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, right? But they asked us, would you like to come down and play with Dead Fish? And we went, yes, of course we would. We've never played in Dublin before. We'd love to. We assumed we were going to be playing to like 10 people and they were going to hate us, but we were just going to go anyway. And it sold out. And the Soundhouse holds about 250 odd people. And I was like, oh, that grew arms and legs very quickly. They booked the second night in the end as well. I think they were on like this tour where they were just on tour, but they were also celebrating a record. So they had one show that was just like, here's the songs, and the other show was here's the album, right? So we got the open for both nights. Second night was probably one of my favorite gigs that we've ever played. But during the time period that all this happened, I started talking to the guy who booked us. His name's Gustavo, and he actually lives in New York. I didn't know this until like a year ago. I kept inviting him to our shows, and he was like, "Can't go, man." And then I never actually asked why not. And one day he was like, "Dude, I live in New York. I can't come and see you unless you come to me, or I'm on holiday. It's not happening." Um, but he asked me when Dead Fish were over, could I put them on in Belfast? And I was like, if this is like hotel and transport and all of that sort of stuff, no. If you want me to book a venue and we'll hope for the best, sure, let's do it. And he was like, no, that it would be everything. And I just said, I can't do it, man. I'm not set up like that. I've no pot of money. I've no blah 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 blah. And in the back of my mind, I went, what did you do that for? It's like here, there's the train right there, the train that you kind of want to be on and you didn't jump. Um, and it's just lingered in the back of my head. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna have a go at it. So I came up with a name, Drag Wins. It's from the proverb of let go or be dragged. I really love that proverb because I have a hard time letting go of anything ever. I'm one of those people that mentally beats myself up about things for like 6 years. And then like the person that's like afflicted will be like, I don't care. And I'm like, great, that was 6 years of my life. But anyway, let go or be dragged is where Drag Wins comes from.
I
Um,
understand. I understand.
yeah, so basically put a Facebook, or not a Facebook, an Instagram story up saying, like, I'm going to do this, and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to try and book local bands. And at first it was a struggle. Michael Smythe from Old Crow Promotions very kindly said, look, here's a few gigs that I've been offered. I don't really have any interest in them. You might have some interest in them. And the first one was a band. It was the first ever drag wind show. Technically the first ever drag wind show was Survivalist in Bangor, which did great. But the first one I ever held independently on my own was a band called the Holy Popes, who were actually fantastic. Von Loop, who I've just put on with Pigeon Pit there, and Stout Talk. I don't know if they're still a band or not, but like no one came. And the band had like a £300 guarantee. The venue is 150 quid. And when I was lifting money out of my savings for the first time, I was like, oh no, maybe I can't do this. Maybe my balls are not as big as I think that they might be. So I kind of took it a wee bit easier. The second gig that Michael gave me, because these were the first three shows that I booked. One of them ended up not happening, which I'm kind of glad about because the band were wanting to do like you get a lot of bands that want to come over and do gigs in Ireland, but they want to do a week of gigs. And I'm like, there's not even 7 cities in Ireland, dude, to be honest with you. So there's no point, or anyway. Um, but the second one was a band called Burn Kit. They came over from, I can't remember, they were from America, but I can't remember for the life of me where they were from, but they were loveliest dudes. They kind of do that like post-jangle punk stuff, but they were class anyway, and I still keep in contact with them. I put us, Four Core, and the Props on it. Props are no longer a band. Don't know if Four Core are on, but it broke even. All I had to do was feed them. It was lovely, but it was the first time that I went, I love this. This this is good, you know. And I didn't know if it was because I got to play with another American band or because I just really enjoyed putting bands on. But after those sort of gigs with guarantees went away and I started to do things locally, it kind of just grew on its own. You know, it just more and more people were like, do you know what? Actually, um, we don't want to work with certain promoters anymore. I'm not getting into all that drama because I'm sure somebody else will bring it up. But you know, we don't want to work with certain promoters anymore. We don't want to work with certain bands anymore. And this is such a gap in the market for fresh air. And if you know someone who actually loves the music to come along and put bands on, you know, I think a lot of people talk about our scene. Um, as if it's some sort of fashion statement, if it's some sort of like gang or club or something like that, you know, and they're like, "Oh, you've done so much for the scene." I'm like, I haven't done anything for the scene. I have helped musicians within Belfast. I have loved their music and I have given them a platform to perform at their best, you know, in some respects.
Okay, there's so much I want to take apart from that. The one thing I did want to say to you though was there are some emerging and prominent promoters, and you mentioned Michael Smith, and you know what you're getting with when Michael is putting on a show. It's going to be shoegaze of some the flavor. And like same goes for a lot of the other promoters around the town, that there's going to be a certain style. But when it comes to Drag Wounds, there's I had in my head, I always liken you to A24, the movie production company. I do not care what they put out. I will watch all of their movies, and it's the same with Drag Wounds. I know that it will probably be something different, but they're always worth going along to see. Um, so I love it from that perspective, and that was more of a statement than a question. But the I see. I I love your ambivalence around the idea of there being a scene and what that means, because and it's something that I both love and wrestle with as a term and a concept, but it's something I kind of want to delve into a little bit more further on with you. Um, so much of what you've said has been about the idea of localness and locality, to around Bangor and Belfast. In terms of influences, like, do you think that the place you're from has shaped your sound like, and I mean that like musically as well as in terms of promotion, and is it something that you can hear in your band, in other bands? Is there kind of a vibe or a feeling about Belfast, or is this something that a convenient lie that we make up to tell ourselves?
Hey, that's a very good question. A lot of our lyrics have been written by Kathy, and Kathy would write about things that are really personal to her. You know, a lot of them, there are a couple of songs that are written by all of us, or one was written by me, whatever, it doesn't matter. But a lot of the lyrics kind of come from experiences that have been had here. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, the Stiff Little Fingers are like the Belfast punk band, and that's great." But there was also X, Y, and Z other punk bands. But we've kind of got away from, in terms of stylistically anyway, we really stray away from that sort of like British punk rock. You know, we don't really do the Idols thing. We don't really sound like Stiff Little Fingers. We were really, you know, me and Neil especially are very, very into like American skate punk revival stuff, you know, like No FX, Rancid, Bad Religion, Green Day, The Offspring, blah, blah, blah. It's on a Tony Hawk's game somewhere. It's in a, you know what I mean? All that sort of stuff. But it's because there's such a strong feeling. A lot of that music is about finding yourself. You know, I think this is what people overlook about punk music. A lot of it's about finding yourself and having a sense of community, and just loving your friends. And you know, a lot of punk songs are about stupid stuff, about like, you know, riding a bike, or you know what I mean, like, oh, I fucked my neighbor's car up, you know, something like that. You know what I mean? But there's such a sense of like community and love and everything else, and fighting against systems that oppress you and whatever else. And in some respects, we've written about that in the context of over here while still playing American skate punk. We always say the words every time we write a song. We're like, the next one has to be a fun song, right? The next one has to be about like, I'm riding a unicycle down, like the lag, and I don't know, but we just never do it. We always end up back to here. This incredibly horrible thing has just happened. Um, yeah, yeah, it's hard. It's a good question. You know.
I think one of the interesting things that you've kind of touched on there that I'd love to just draw out a bit more is when we talk about Belfast as a musical heritage, we inevitably talk about Stiff Little Fingers, and I love them. I've seen Stiff Little Fingers probably more times than any other band. I go to see them every time they're in town. I think they're wonderful. But when we talk about, politics in music, we still frame it in terms of early Stiff Little Fingers talking about or singing about the Troubles. And I noticed that there's a lot of music, your own included, which is very deeply political, but it's not historically Belfast political, and that interests me. And I wonder, like, do you have a kind of a deeper take on this? That are the Troubles there in your music? Are they worth talking about? Are they, you're a child of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, it was indeed. I mean, I honestly don't know. I'll be right. Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I don't know enough about the Troubles. I studied it in school, but every textbook, every syllabus you read about the Troubles or the history of Northern Ireland and Ireland is completely skewed with by whoever wrote it. It's always, there's never a neutral, here's what happened. It's always, my granny said this happened, so that's what happened, right? Okay. Um, so we kind of go for modern events as opposed to yeah, and like the Bloody Sunday or something like that that happened. I mean, we feel anger about those sort of things, and we don't want to forget about them. But it's also you live here and now. You live now, and there's things happening now. People seem to think that like history has happened. History continues to happen every single day of our lives and will continue to happen. But there seems to be this perception that like that's it. Now we're just riffing now around now until like, the sun evaporates and we die. That seems to be this perception. So like songs like Gable Walls is a great example. That was written directly in response to the Ballymena race riots that happened last year. Who the two teenagers in question were acquitted, and everybody's real quiet about that. But anyway, and whenever all the riots happened last week, I wanted to post it and not say anything, but I just thought, you know what, this isn't about us. I think we just need to really stand up and go, actually, what's happening now isn't acceptable. But it was written as a response to that. I think that if we didn't write that song, then we would have written it like this week. Then it would have been the same lyrics, it would have been the same riffs, it would have been the same everything. Um, yeah.
I yeah, I like that as an answer. That's a really good insight. Um, I kind of moving you into, and we've kind of organically come into like your present embodiment as a musician. In terms of creative process, has the way that you make music changed significantly over the years? And how did that, what are the starting and ending states? Because like you talked about, how you collaborate within the new normal. Um, has that brought a dynamism into your personal creative process?
I mean, we would start. Typically, I would write. Typically, I would write the riffs. To be honest with you, Paul would come in with bits and pieces and say, "Look, this riff goes with this riff." Neil would try and arrange it. So I come in and go, "Here's the riffs, guys," and we'll try and sort out like a big puddle of whatever. So that's why a lot of the songs you can kind of tell that they're written from bass lines, like stuff like meta da 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 da. Not yours is a Paul song, it's very like his sort of style of things. We're working on another song that's an entirely Paul song. I want to do more Paul songs, to be honest with you, because he's not really into like punk the same way he's into like, like Metallica and Black Sabbath and his sort of he likes that sort of like more thrashy metal. So do I, in fairness, but I just don't write it. It just doesn't come out when I pick up my instrument. But we would typically sit down and go like, here's the riffs. We'll try and jam them through, and then we'll sit and work on them and this, that, and the other. And we'll usually have the song completed and then bully Kathy until she writes lyrics because Kathy's like 36. I'm really sorry if I'm wrong, Kathy, but like Kathy's like 36 and going back to university again, is a teacher, does X, Y, and Z other things. She's the busiest person in the world. And we're like, here, can you write lyrics for our songs, please? So a lot of our practices are, Kathy will sit there and write and we'll try and think of riffs and stuff like that. But yeah, whenever the song is being written, like there's nobody sets out and goes, today we're going to write a song about this thing that happened. It's just the lyrics will come as a response. They'll come naturally as what Kathy will hear. She'll think of words and she'll go, this kind of goes with that, or I'll sing like da 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 here and try and fit the words in around it, that sort of way. So yeah.
I just talking about Kathy, like as a just a presence on stage, she's just amazing, and like her delivery that she really commands an audience on like just in ways that is just really unique to her. I love seeing her on stage. She's always magnificent. And but can I ask, how as a band did you all get together? Did you know each other
So
in advance or?
Kathy and Neil have known each other since they were kids. And Neil put an advert up essentially saying, "Look, I want to start a female-fronted punk band, like kind of like Tsunami Bomb and stuff like that. They're distillers." Um, he wanted Kathy to sing in it. Me and Paul used to work together like 12 years ago in teleperformance. Could you imagine sitting waiting for like, an hour to speak to someone about your Sainsbury's order and I answer the phone or Paul answers the, can you imagine that? But so we worked with each other way back when, and I always knew Paul was a fantastic guitar player, I always knew. But we originally had Brendan from he was in Color Arcadia. I don't know what band he's in now, if he's in one, but we originally had him, and the songs were much more, they were really like, kind of post punky, disco poppy oriented. And it really wasn't a, a punk band at all. But Brendan got a job and he just wasn't available. And the more time went on, the more practice was missed. And eventually we were like, listen, dude, this is either going to work or it's not. He graciously said, look, I'm already doing Color Arcadia. I'm busy enough. Like, it's grand. We're all good. Don't worry about it. Still really like the guy. Every time I see him, I'm like, how the fuck are you? But we got Paul in anyway, and Paul immediately understood the assignment of being like, you want loud and fast riffs? Let's do it. Do you know what I mean? I'm happy to play whatever. Let's get onto a stage. Let's go. So Neil put an advert up anyway saying like, I'm looking at a bass player and a guitar player for this, and I play drums. So the hardest part is finding a drummer always if you want to start a band. There's like 7 of them in Northern Ireland apparently. It's mad. um, but I answered the ad saying like, yeah, I can play bass, no problem. Yeah, I can do that. Lied, just lied, just lied, Rob. I'm not even gonna lie about it. I could like pick up. I like knew a couple of like New Order and Joy Division songs that I'd like battered into my brain through like reading tabs and trying to be like, so this is how you do it. And I knew the chords on guitar, like I can play like a G chord or the C chord or whatever badly. Like if you give me a guitar, I can't play the guitar. There's no chance. I would really need to concentrate and learn from scratch. But I lied enough about the bass, and I was able to transcribe what I was hearing in my head into a bass line. At first, it took a lot of help from like Paul to go, "Oh, you're kind of thinking like this," and then I got it. But the more times went on, the more I'll just pick it up and I'm go like, and I've just taught myself naturally how to play the bass. But Lord, those early practice sessions, I don't know how I wasn't kicked out of the band as well, to be honest with you. I think there was a time they were like, we need to kick Carlin out. And the more the time went on, the more the songs went, the more like I took charge of like booking everything and making sure we were on the right trajectory. And like I am Stalin a wee bit, I'll not lie about it. Like we have arguments in our band because I'm dictator Carlin, unfortunately. But like it has worked. We have done really good gigs for our wee band. Yeah, it is work. We're still gigging after 5 years. We've done really good support slots, but that's kind of where we started from. That it went from like Carlin's lying his way into a band, or their way into a band. Sometimes I misgender myself, Jesus Christ. But Carlin is lying their way into a band, and to like, oh yeah, promoter and kind of well-respected musician. Maybe I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's again for me, it's the big flip flop of being on the outside and now being inside. You know.
Fair enough. Can I move you on to talking about, there's one question I always have for people about, the scene, and the one I want to ask you is, what is the hardest thing about trying to build a career in music from here specifically? Do you feel that there's a ceiling, or is there kind of a feeling that you have that, local can be enough, or do you have to leave here to break out?
I mean, that's a good question. It's about who you know, isn't it? I think that's the same everywhere. I mean, we don't live in a land of opportunity like, America, where like there are X amount of opportunities you can get. We live in a very small wee rock. And there's only so many people in this rock, and some of those people may know people across the water or whatever else. I mean, you do have people who are, making waves and trying to make moves into being a more established band. Survivalists are a great example of that. I've been friends with a lot of them boys since we were kids. They're a great example of like they know who they know. They built their sound really well. They built their foundation. They have their sound. They have their songs. They have themselves figured out. They also know the right people to speak to get X, Y, and Z done. They got themselves signed. They got the opportunities across the water. They got the recording contracts and whatever else. They got all that. it- they're still here, they're still a local band as such, but realistically, in a 3, 4, 5 years time, who knows where they're going to be? Maybe their return show to Belfast will be a sold out Limelight one or an an Ulster Hall gig. You don't know. There's other bands like Makeshift Dark Bar. You're doing the film for them, where they've had great success in playing with like Idol or like idols, and they've been across the water supporting people as well. I don't, unfortunately, I don't listen to their music, but I'm aware of their success. You know what I mean? But I think it's really, like I said, it's about who you know, and it's about the strings you want to pull. You know?
Yeah, there's a lot to kind of ponder in this, that there's a lot of people here making really great music across so many genres. And I've had so many conversations along the lines of, oh, you're listening to them, do you think they'll make it? Well, I suppose it depends on what your definition of making it is. um I had an interesting conversation there a while ago that kind of undermined a lot of what I thought I knew about the local scene. That it was explained to me that there are more people here making music just for the hell of it than I had realized. And there are some people that have, records out. I own them on vinyl, and they've no expectation of, going, to, sell out Wembley or wherever one sells out these days. They're doing it for the fun of it. And this,
Hmm.
like, I approach my little segment of the Northern Irish music scene as my hobby, and it's strange to me when other people do as well. That, for them, the success is whatever they're experiencing now.
Yeah, I mean, some people, their career is their life, or they've got kids, and this is just a nice way to blow off steam and have a laugh here, mates. Certainly for us. I mean, we're not looking. If I'm being candid, I mean, I don't think we're ever going to do like really big major sold out gigs. We're just happy to be like a safe pair of hands for a promoter. We're just happy to go to like a wee village at the other end of the country and blow the roof off the place and come home and go, yeah, if that's all it ever is, great.
I love that attitude, but there's part of me that is just, I've been exposed in the last couple of years to so many bands, so many fantastic musicians, to songwriters, to singers, and there's part of me that goes, if it were just down to talent and ability, so many people should be getting vast amounts of success. And it really does hurt when it comes down to that understanding that it is political, is about who you know and about who is going to give you the breaks. I can't be too angry about it because that is the way of the world. But there is just a part of me that realizes that I would love for so many of these artists to have that wider experience to have their music listened to on across the globe, and for some it's going to happen, and unfortunately for some it's not.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I do get discouraged sometimes. Like a great example, we played last Friday. Was it last Friday? Maybe the Friday before. Who knows now? With the Downstrokes in Dublin, and it was a really small wee room. And we're used to playing really small wee rooms, and the room comes alive. You know, where or playing on a like if we're playing a lineup where maybe it's been dead for the first couple of acts and there's been like smatterings of applause and stuff, and then they see us and it's like suddenly there's pits and there's people singing and shouting and stuff, and these people just were like whoa and clapped, and I was like I was visibly annoyed about it on stage, like, and I shouldn't do that because it is unprofessional. But I was like, this sucks because you've just driven 100 miles to play to people who just don't give a fuck. You do get humbled sometimes. It's really hard to draw the line. You kind of have to accept. I mean, I love music. I always wanted to be a musician. I'm very happy and very humbled to even be here in the first place, if I'm being really honest about it. But like, if someone did say, "Here, do you want to go and play Download Festival main stage tomorrow?" Yes, yes, here's my arms. But like, you have to be realistic and just be happy with the opportunities you're given.
I suppose that kind of segues into where I want us to go next, like in terms of future plans and such. Do you think about that relationship between artistic growth and integrity and or versus commercial success? Do you see them as compatible? Do you see them at all? I suppose is my question.
Man, I used to get really hokey about gigs. Like, I'd be like, "Oh, we're not playing that. We're not. We're above that now." And it's like, you're not. Nobody cares, right? No, nobody cares. There's no hierarchy in the music scene anymore. There's no whatever. We're all in this jumbled up mess together. Um, I think that you kind of just have to accept that sometimes you can work really, really, really hard and try and really want it and try as hard as you want and do all the right gigs that you think are right gigs, and you're just not going to get the commercial success. I mean, like we submitted our songs to BBC introducing and Across the Line and all this other stuff. All this stuff we submitted songs to, and we seen other bands that were kind of similar. We seen heavier bands than us have the airplay, and nobody. We were still. I feel like we're like no FX, where nobody plays our stuff on the radio. Like we're kind of like we've had to fight tooth and nail for pretty much every opportunity that we have had given our way. It has been an upward battle. So for me, that sort of idea of success, I don't factor it into my decision making when I want to do a gig. I just factor in like, are we driving 100 miles away and are they gonna fucking hate us? Because if the answer is yes, or if we're playing on a here's the name out of a hat lineup and it's not for like charity or something, then I'm like, I don't want to do that because as much fun as it is playing with your friends, if you're playing to people who don't give you the energy back, it's not fun. It feels like you're like, I don't know. It's like you're the dancing monkey, and the people are just kind of like, okay, great.
Yeah, so that
Here's your
was
dream.
very nice.
Here's
Thank
your
you very
dream. Don't dream again. I dare you.
Sticking with ideas of the future, what's next for the new normal? What's next for Carlin Brown?
For new normal, we just take it one day at a time, one gig at a time. We just see that's the way we've always done things. We just see what's around the corner. And there's been some great corners, over the years, with like the gigs with Dead Fish, the gigs with Drug Church, Lord Jane Grace, my one of my heroes ever. Like, what? How did that happen? We started in West Belfast and nobody liked us until 5 minutes ago. But okay, you know what I mean? Like, but we take things one day at a time. So every nice gig that happens is a very lovely surprise. For me personally, I mean, with Dragons, it's seemingly just kind of gaining arms and legs by itself, and I'm just here. I feel like it's my Green Goblin mask. There's sometimes it's like my alter ego. I I kind of sometimes there's like I have been approached by by people being like, "Will you put this band on? Here's what they're looking for. Here's X, Y, and Z." And like in my head, I'm like, I can't afford that. If that doesn't do well, it's coming out of my savings. My fiance is going to big head me, and that's it. It's the end of my life. But then there's a voice in the back of my head is that coward. Do it, coward. So yeah, I don't know. I've got a really big gig coming up at the end of the year, but I can't talk about because they haven't actually confirmed. They said we're coming, we're going to do this, but I haven't got everything through. I haven't signed any documentation. I haven't done all the due process of getting them here, so I can't say who it is. But fun. Um,
If
yeah,
they're
we've
looking
got
for me to film the gig,
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, to find the person, like I've definitely made them the best offer. There's the Trans Pride fundraiser in August, which is the second annual one. You were there last year, you know.
yep, that's how
Uh,
you got talking.
yeah,
The,
so
like a
we
year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this year is already selling really well. I'm hoping next year I can do something even better. I kind of feel like I need to top it. Like last year was a really good, lovely, my first time booking a festival. It was a great day. And this year I'm kind of like, it's a wee bit different. I tried to book it a wee bit differently. I think next year I am going to try and do something entirely different. I almost feel like doing 2 days and doing like one day of like indie music and singer songwriter and like the lighter sort of music, and then day two of just being like raw, yeah, I kind of want to do that because there's so many people in that community that are pro LGBTIA plus and more letters. There's so many people that are really really they're big allies, or they are queer themselves, and they don't get the opportunity to show up for that cause like that. It's always booked to like this band are visibly queer, visibly trans, and they play accessible music. So here you go. Whereas like there is a lot of people in that other world that are they're big allies, um, and don't get the stage for it. So maybe someone should do something about that.
You sound like the person to do it. And,
Yeah.
like I said, that's how you and I first met, uh, and talked about coming along to film and support and, trying to be the best ally I can. If you're going to do 2 days, I'm going to do my best to be there for 2 days to film and support it and try to get that word out into the world. So this is the part where kind of try to get a more philosophical type of question. And the question I have for you is the time traveler question. If you could go back and do one thing differently that you think would affect the outcome, w- would you? And what is it?
Hmm. Hmm. I think if I could go back in time, I would definitely go back in like 2011. This is really specific, but my dad bought me a guitar and an amp and didn't get me anything else like, a book on how to play said guitar or, you know, didn't really see, didn't give me a guitar tutor or anything like that, which would have probably went a long way back then. But, I'm not blaming my dad for my own lack of ambition back then, but I sold it to my friend for like 50 quid, and I don't know what I did with that money. You know what I mean? I don't know what I did with it. I probably smoked it. Who knows? Knowing me, that's actually exactly what happened to it back then. But anyway, I sold it to a friend of mine. He had it for a while, probably sold it himself for the same reason. And I really wish that I didn't. And I picked it up back then and learned how to play the fucking thing. I wish I still had it, but I more so wish I learned how to play the thing. Because I think it would have made me a better musician, and it probably would have meant I would have made my introduction to music much earlier than I did. Because I started when I was 25. A lot of people start when they're like 18, 19. You see that in our scene now, like where so many of the bands are like in their early 20s, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I'm getting older and these kids are getting younger. And it's like not the scene from Days Confused, it's just pure despair, you know? Um,
I'm gonna
but
say there's a
yeah.
part of me that really feels for your dad because my youngest asked for a guitar. And so I went and I talked to a friend of mine who was just happened to be selling a really nice, I think about 2010, 2011 Fender Stratocaster. And I went, yeah, I'll buy that off you. And then my kid went, but I'll need an amp. and cables and strings and I was just like, and I'll need somebody to teach me. Are there? This started expensive and it's getting more expensive. But you know
Mm,
what? I had the privilege of seeing that child on the stage playing guitar publicly for their first time just last weekend. And every bit of that expense just was forgotten about. Seeing the beauty of the music they were making with the people on stage, the pride and joy that they got in it. So if there's any parents that are watching this and are going like, "Oh, music lessons for my kid are expensive," go for it. What they will get from it and what you as a parent will get from it are joyous. So that's my little rant. Um, I will just quickly mention again, your EP "In Breach of Silence" is available and, should be streamed, bought, downloaded, everything that, will give something back to the band. This is the point I'm kind of very gingerly approaching because usually I would say this is where we turn the tables and you have a question for me, and other guests would have supplied me with that question in advance. Do you have a question for me? That I do I
wow, I have so many questions for you. We've talked about this before because I also want to be another white dude with a podcast. And I have said that I want to have you on it. I would love you to be the inaugural guest because I think that you're a fascinating person with so many great traits of personality, but also so many other interesting things. Like when you just dropped it in the conversation that you distilled gin and brought me said gin, and it was lovely. But I have so many questions that I don't want to ask any now. You know what I mean? I don't want to ask any now. It feels very weird. But I mean, like,
pick
I think
one.
a question I will pick one. I mean, for me, I always wonder where when did you decide that like this is what I gotta do now? I'm gonna just go and take a camera to every gig I can get my hands on and film all this and document it. Like where did that real love of archival footage and music and history come from? I know you
Oh,
were an archaeologist, so if you tell me
yeah,
that,
so yeah, so I went to university and the course I got onto was just arts in what was then UCG, is now University of Galway. And basically you turned up and they gave you a list. I think it was like broken out into like 10 categories. And they said, out of these 10 categories, pick four subjects, no more than one from each of the 10 categories. And I went, "Ooh," I'd been sent there to do English and history and, get a nice teaching degree. And as a parent, I understand why now. That's a good, safe job. And I needed two others. And I went, "Oh, philosophy sounds interesting." I always wanted to learn a bit about philosophy. And the lecturers we met were quite interesting. And I needed a fourth subject. And then there was archaeology. I thought, "Well, what is this?" And I thought, "Oh, my parents, as when we were kids, used to bring us on archaeology society outings." And I went to the lecture and I just went, "Oh, wow, this is fantastic. This is really interesting." And rapidly said, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my days." And I then did and got, a number of degrees in it. I went out into the world and started surveying stuff and digging stuff up, and literally and metaphorically. And I ended up writing books and papers in learned journals, and a moderately successful blog about archaeology. And then came a point coming on for now 15 years ago where like in the midst of the global downturn, I could not make a living with archaeology anymore. I had two small children and I had zero money coming in. And I didn't know how to see myself in terms that weren't as an archaeologist first. And my wife said one really key thing to me. Says, "You will always be an archaeologist, maybe just one that doesn't do it as their day job." And that kind of flipped a few switches in my head that allowed me to move on with my life. I ended up working in IT. I've been remarkably happy doing that for the last, like I said, about 15 years now. I get a lot from it, but there's still part of me that wants, a lot of the work I did as an archaeologist was what they call pre-development. So somebody is building an estate of houses or they're quarrying. We would get in there, rescue that archaeology. Like the term is preservation through record. So you dig it up, you photograph it, you draw it, and you preserve that knowledge. And somewhere along the way, I I've always been interested in, recordings of concerts. I love bootlegs. Somewhere along the way, I took out um, my phone and just took a few short clips, and that was really interesting. And within, I had a couple of key conversations, and I mentioned this previously in a conversation with, I think it was Dan Graham, that I got talking to Dr. John Darcy at Queen's, who kind of put the idea in my head that there was the longer term idea that this would be a great idea for preservation, as well as doing something that was really good for bands right now. And so to be able to, they don't always sit perfectly side by side. There are times where bands don't have the best gig, that they don't want it seen by people because it's not good for their career right now. But I would love it to be there for, 100 years time, because people will absolutely adore it. And sometimes you have to go, well, yeah, we will cut those couple of songs because you didn't like them. And like I said, I didn't know if anybody would be interested. I, and I think there's been a lot of people who've been very kind of wary of me, because like, oh, you're turning up with the camera and you're not charging us. What are you getting out of this? And that's the other thing, that a lot of my gig going was brought about by a deep need for loud places that were positively impactful on my mental health. And I've spoken. I keep saying I don't speak about it much. I realize I've now spoken quite a lot about enduring and allowing those around me to endure my depressive episodes. And as I say to you and basically any band I've seen in the last couple of years, you have been instrumental in me getting help, me still being here, because there's a lot of good that I have gotten from our local, this is across all genres, in, to use the word you don't like, the scene. And I've loved it, and that's, if I can help stuff now by highlighting people through this podcast, through bringing along a camera, and hopefully getting people seen and heard, across the globe. What I'm getting from it is huge, because it's just not counted in pounds and pence.
Yeah, I understand that. It's such a it's such a unique way to give back because there's never really been this before. There's nobody that's ever sat down and went, I'm going to go to gigs in Belfast and archive them. There's so many bands I remember from seeing, like local bands even 15 odd years ago. Oh my God. But that there aren't around anymore. But I remember how fantastic they were. And maybe then we ever recorded like two or three songs, and that's all you have of that band. To be able to go on, like, one day new normal will break up and I'll be able to go on YouTube and look up and go, oh, do you remember this gig? That was great crack, and look back fondly. Or maybe some band does get bigger and their fans are able to come back and go, oh, look at them there where they're playing in front of 10 people and it's such a unique and precious gift to be able to give something like that back. Yeah, yeah.
I've got to say, I love it, and I am so grateful at the degree of acceptance that I've gotten from both fans and from musicians. The There came a point where a lot of people said, "Oh, you're clearly inspired by Lou Smith." In London, I was there. I'm sorry, I have no idea who this is. I went and looked the guy up, and he's been doing this for years, and he's got an amazing archive, and doing pretty much the same sort of stuff. And like the fact that he's doing it is just inspirational to me. And I think we're now at a point where we've both filmed at least one of the same bands. And it's just like, oh, I filmed somebody that, Lou Smith has filmed. But as you know, like I've had problems with sciatica, which means that I haven't been able to stand for very long. Um, I'm been very lucky that there have been venues that have said, "Look, we know you. We're happy to provide you with a stool you can film from." And so long as I'm able to, I am going to be here. I'm going to try and do this. No more than bands having a finite lifespan, there's probably a finite lifespan on how long I am physically able and interested in doing this. But until that point is reached, I am happy to be here. We've got like 350 individual band performances. The vast majority of them are complete, end to end from opening to thank you and good night. Some of the early ones are just literally a few minutes, but they're all lovely little records. And my only regret for the first ones were that I didn't have the best camera, that I didn't film everything. And I suppose there's part of me that, even though I know it's impossible to be omnipresent at every gig, at 2 and 3 a night on different ends of the town, I would love to be. And while I can't do it, I would love to inspire somebody else to go, this is what I'd like to do as well.
That's what I was actually going to say, is I reckon you probably already have. Um, and there probably will be a successor in some respects, or somebody who wants to pick up where you leave off eventually. Um, yeah, well, I hope there is. Anyway,
Belfast is a small town, but it's still not so small that, there isn't room for another person doing what I'm doing. At the very least, there's two sides to the stage. There you can be over there, I can be here. And there are so many times where I've had to, be very, very sorry that, people come and ask me, can you be at my gig on Friday? And they're, well, actually, you're the, like, 3rd person I've turned down because I've already been booked for that. There are 3 or maybe 4 other venues I could be in tonight. So, yeah, there's plenty out there. There's a lot, and, if somebody started doing exactly the same thing as I'm doing tomorrow, I will not feel challenged by it. I will be their biggest cheerleader.
it's such a good attitude to have. It's such a positive attitude to have. I think so many people feel. I mean, and in life, I have felt like that, where I'm like, well, you're doing the same thing I am, so I'm not going to bother anymore. It's like, if everybody just did one thing, we would never have anything created or built. We work better when we work together.
Well, don't get me wrong, I now 2 years into this, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I'm doing, and, I think for me, the biggest thing has been, like, stripping away my ego out of this, because I came to understand that what I want to do is be here to help, and I realized that if I'm only helping in ways that validate me and my ego and my number of, hits, likes, follows, subscribes on whatever, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, if that's the only measure that I am interested in, then I am actually not helping anybody but myself. And so I just want to, like, walk back from that and go, well, take your ego out of it. Understand that, you are trying to help. Listen to the people that you're trying to help, because if you're helping in ways that aren't useful, it's not help.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally respect that. It tickles my it tickles my brain in some ways, because I'm very into like the archive of, if I get into a band, you know, oh God, like Courtney's sitting here like, oh God, don't I know this? But when I get seriously into a band, I want to have everything that they've ever done, and I want to know every song that they've ever played, what place and what time, and where did the song come from, and why was it written, and where are the demos and whatever else. And I feel like that what you're doing is such like I said, for it will be for people who want to come back and go, oh well, look at this band there. You know, look, what did they play here? What did we do there? I mean, there's been a few times I've looked back and I've watched one of our performances and I've been like, oh, we play that song entirely different now. It's a really really unique and really cool it's a really cool thing to do. I don't know how else to articulate that.
Well,
I think my brain is
a lot,
we would stupefied right now.
a lot of people, and myself included, forget that I've only been at this for 2 years. It was like 2 years last March, and one of the lovely things that I absolutely didn't expect, that I probably should have had I thought more deeply about it getting into this, is that seeing certain bands time and time again, like I think I've seen Gush 7 times, Disorder maybe 6 times, 7 times, Casual Riots the same, Makeshift Art Bar, who we mentioned previously, not as many but close. And what I've seen with those and others, that they'll be going, well, this is a new one we've just worked on. It's never been played in front of people before. And yeah, again, they're playing to, like 10 of their closest friends and like two people who wandered in. And, 6 months, 9 months, a year later, they're better crowds. There are people there I haven't seen before who are in the front, loving it, know all the words to all the songs. And you see them develop as musicians, as songwriters, in terms of their stagecraft, and how they're building an audience and how they're building that community within that larger Belfast community. And I just find this fascinating, and it's a delightful part of it. And again, it's down to just the genuine feeling of delight that I have at being accepted by all these wonderful musicians and promoters and venues that are glad to see me coming through the door with my ever increasingly large kit bag of bits and pieces I bring with me. Listen, Carlin, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Again, I will say to anybody that has made it this far towards us, please come and subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on Spotify. I would love to think that my wife could retire on what we're going to make from in terms of the commissions from this podcast. It's not happening just yet, but I'd love to think that it was it was something we could do. So please, yes, every subscription, every follow is very much appreciated, and I thank everybody. Carlin, right now, I thank you, and I look forward to the next time I see a gig that Dragoons are promoting, or that you guys are on stage as the new normal playing.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm really grateful to be here. I look forward to seeing you as well, with your array of cameras and tricks.
Okay, with that, thank you all very much, and we're going to hit pause, stop.